Welcome back everybody for another devlog. This week I thought I'd mix things up a bit. I'm currently on my reading week from teaching, which means I have a bit more free time than usual, and it seemed like a good opportunity to knock out some big engine changes I've been meaning to do, and to mix up the format a bit. Usually I record all my footage at the end of the week, then assemble it, but I thought this week it might be a bit more fun to follow along as I go and watch the progress. So right now it's Tuesday. I'm just about to get started. I have no idea how this will go. Who knows? Maybe I'll hit a big bug, a big issue, and I won't be able to get any tasks done, but I guess you guys will just have to watch along and see. Lots of suspense. Let's get started. Before we begin, I wanted to talk about what items I'm working on this week, as well as take a step back and look at where I am on the project, as well as what's upcoming. So this week I made a Trello board for the project. I've never actually used Trello before. All my experience in the software industry has been using extremely boring management software, so pardon any beginner mistakes here. I wanted to set up the board to talk about this week's video and have a visual, but also to give some people some more insight on the project and where I'm at. And if you'd like to follow along, I'll post a link in the description so you can track my progress. As I mentioned at the top, all of this week's work is all around engine changes for the most part. There's three real items that have been kind of nagging changes that I need to make. I've been kind of putting them off just because I didn't want to break any of my code. Some might say this is not the best idea to be making these changes this late in the game, but I need to add in some gameplay which requires 3D collision detection to the game, and so I want to make these changes to be able to support that. So right now in my game, all of my collision is in 2D, so there's no height at all. Just the player can't collide with walls, enemies can't collide with the player, all of that stuff. But I want to be able to have a height component because I'm going to be adding in a weapon, the second weapon in the game, which fires bullets in an arc. And so if it hits the top of a shelf, I want it to activate at the top of the shelf instead of kind of falling right through the shelf onto the ground. And the same goes for the last enemy is going to fire projectiles, this bad enemy. So these two items require me to implement some collision detection in 3D. So that's the first item I need to make. The other items I need to do are around particles. Not really as necessary, but just things that have been bothering me. So right now, my particles don't support rotations. If you look at my actual files I use, they're all asymmetrical because I'm not actually rotating them at all. So I can't have like a horizontal line for sparks that turn to face the direction they're moving right now. So I'd like to have that rotation ability added in. And then seeing as I'm already doing this work on collision detection, I'd also like to make it so the particles collide with the shelves and walls so that they don't just slide through them when you fire your bullets. And then at the bottom here, I have that second weapon and that bad enemy, which I want to get to. So that's what I'm up to this week. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about where the project is at. And so you can see next week I have this mysterious item, brick gameplay. This is the last gameplay mechanic I'm going to cover in the devlogs. This is kind of the final one for the game. Once I go through and polish and rework this next week, I think I'm going to be ready to put together a trailer. So the week after that, I'm going to be working on the trailer, and then I'm going to be contacting Sony and Microsoft. My goal for this project has always been to put it out on a console. So these are kind of the next steps. I feel like once I get this week done of this engine work, I do the gameplay for the bricks, and then I put together a trailer. I think I'm going to be ready to contact the console manufacturers to start moving forward on that. The rest of this doc, you can see I have a lot more to-dos, but I think that this is really what I'm working towards right now. And so 2 more weeks, and hopefully I'll be able to make some progress with that. Without further ado, here is Turbo John. So as I work here, now's probably a good time to mention I am well aware it is a very bad idea to make these types of changes late in development, and that's why I tried to minimize this change as much as possible. I added in 3D collision detection, but I made it so it doesn't interact with 2D at all. If I were back building my engine, I would definitely want to flesh this out, and this is a bit of a hack job in that sense. but by doing that, I'm hoping I'll minimize any potential issues, although I'm still going to be testing this and looking for bugs for the next couple weeks as a result of this. Being a software developer, I definitely find I'm constantly itching up against this of desires to add in code that's probably going to cause issues, and I'm always fighting that urge. So after what looks like just under 3 hours, I've got the 3D collision starting to work. It looks like I've switched the player to use a sphere and I've used cubes for the shelves. But the issue I'm running into now, which I'll show you, is it looks like my cube sizes for the shelves are varying and they're all different. So now I need to figure out what's going on in sizing them that's leading to that problem. At this point, I was relying on the same approach I took with the 2D, where I looked at the models coming in and I tried to size their collision areas based off of the size of those models. This issue I was having right now was because some of these models I'm actually rotating, and so these boxes are actually kind of rotated 90 degrees, causing some to not fit properly. This was particularly annoying because it wasn't necessarily related to the code I had just written, and it was preventing me from properly seeing if things were working. I then started trying to rotate those boxes according to the models. This didn't actually fully fix my issue. I'm going to have to come back to this later, but at this point I thought this was working. Alright, so I think I'm done for the first night. Put in some good hours. I'm pretty happy with the 3D collision. It seems to be working pretty well. A little bit of issues where when the player is moving from one shelf to the next, they can still collide with the previous one. So I'm going to have to iron some of that out. But it seems like the changes I don't seem to have broken anything that I already had, which is good. Tomorrow I'm going to have to double check with the gameplay type stuff, the combat stuff of making sure the enemies can still be shot, making sure they can still melee the player, that type of stuff. But tentatively it seems like things are going well. That was a pretty long day. I had a class to teach. Tomorrow I don't have any class, so I'm hoping this keeps me on schedule and I can try and get all 5 changes done. I'd say like 75% of the way through this first one. But I'm going to sign off for today. I'm pretty tired. Alright, so I'm back for day 2 here. Getting started a bit earlier today. It's Wednesday and I have the full day free, so I'm hoping to be able to finish up the 3D collisions. Really, if I could get everything but the particles done, that would be great. So doing the bad enemy and the launcher gun as well. If I could do that, then I think I'd set myself up for tomorrow finishing off the particle stuff. Because usually I want to have Friday to be able to edit the video. So feeling pretty good about it. Let's hop in and see what we can get done today. So I began today pretty gung-ho, feeling like I was going to be able to get a lot done. Unfortunately, pretty well immediately I realized I still had that issue with the bounding boxes for the shelves. So what I ended up doing was just using one big cube for each little section of the shelves. I've got a video here I'll show you. After doing this, I just had one more bug I had to solve around preventing my collision checks from happening, just to try and be a little more efficient. It was preventing them from actually running. So once I got that going, the only thing I had left to do was I needed to make sure that everything that could be colliding was using a sphere or a cube instead of 2D objects like they had been previously. So stuff like all the enemies, the player, the bullets, all the walls, all of those things needed to be switched over to 3D. So it's about just coming up on 5 o'clock now. It looks like the 3D collision seems to be in. A little bit annoying. I wasted a lot of time just kind of on annoying stuff around the collision. I think the collision detection was pretty well good the first time. There were some minor changes I have to make, but just stuff around the periphery of getting the information to that code. But it seems to be working now. I checked with the combat with just the bear. I'll go back and I'll check with all the other enemies later. But I think I'm going to start moving on the second weapon and the bat and still try and get those done tonight. That was a bit of a slog. Definitely banged my head against that a bit more than I would have liked. So this is why I usually don't film myself coding, just in case it goes south like today, but that's okay. We're still doing all right. Still got quite a bit of daylight. I'll check in a bit. So as you can probably tell, I was feeling pretty bummed at this point. I was really hopeful that I could make a lot more progress, and the collision detection had really slowed me down. So by switching to the launcher and the bat, I was hoping I could make some easy progress. I'll show a video here of the launcher. Mostly the idea is if you hold down the trigger, you can move this target reticule, and when you release the trigger, a projectile will fire in an arc there. I ended up finishing out the night just working on the bat and the launcher before I packed it in. They were both pretty rough, but starting to get there at this point. Good morning. Back for day 3. Today's Thursday. Gonna jump in again. I'm feeling pretty good today in that I've got an initial implementation of the second gun in. I still have a lot of things to fine tune there. It's not doing any damage to enemies yet. And I still gotta make sure that the 3D collision is working all right with it. I want to adjust a little bit the arc of shooting it as well. The bat enemy I've started working on. I still need to set up its projectile, but it's in there. I think particles colliding with shelves should be doable today, but I think the rotations on particles I might have to push off from this week. I think it might be just too much. I think I need at least a full day on that, and then much like the 3D collisions, I think it'll take a full day, and then probably going to be testing to double check that it's actually working properly. So I may push that. I don't know if we'll do that next week or if we'll try and find another time slot to do that, but I think I can get the 4 out of the 5 done this week. So I'm feeling pretty good after making that decision today. We'll see how today goes though. Let's get into it. Calling the audible on the particle rotations definitely relieved some stress. I felt a little bit better at that point, and so I started to dig in on polishing both the launcher and the bat. It took a lot more time than I thought it would. With the launcher, I wanted to set up an AoE, so when it lands, it would kind of check in a radius to see if there's any enemies to damage. And with the bat, I ended up messing around with kinematic equations a lot, both with the launcher and the bat. But the bat, I wanted to spit out kind of an ink that would stay on the floor, and it would spit out a stream of them. So that ended up taking up quite a bit of time. They're both still fairly rough. They're kind of at the point in my previous devlogs when I cover a topic and I do the before video. That's kind of where they're at. They still need probably a week's worth of polishing and still fine tuning as well. But I was happy I was able to get those 2 done. So at that point I had about 3 out of 5 finished, and I was feeling pretty good about myself. So it's about 4:30, a little after that today on Thursday. I think I'm good with the launcher. I ironed out some kinks. There's still a fair amount of smoothing out I want to do, just about like how fast you can move with the launcher and just kind of improving the gameplay. I also want like a better little effect for where it's going to land and all that kind of stuff. And damage, obviously, I'm going to have to adjust. The bat, I think I have figured out now. I'm just running the code now to see if it's working. I've got it set up so it'll shoot projectiles in an arc, and then those will turn into kind of like ink stains, and if the player walks into them, it'll poison them. Maybe I'm now copying out, but now I'm thinking maybe I leave the particles colliding with obstacles or the shelves and bundle that together with the other particle item, and instead I try and work on I have 2 other weapons as well in the game, and they're also going to involve kind of the explosion setup, the AoE effect from the launcher, and then I have a kind of oil slick gun, which is going to actually be similar to the way the bat attacks. So I'm thinking those tie in, so I might instead do those. But either way, I think I'm ready for a break right about now. I spent the remainder of the evening working on the other 2 weapons. I found making progress on them was a lot easier compared to the other stuff because I had already worked on the bat and the launcher. I was able to get them in a pretty good state. They still need some polishing, but I'm happy with them. Let's do a roundup now. Obviously, showing off the 3D collision's a little bit hard. It's going to be in all of this, but here is the bat enemy. Its AI needs a lot of massaging still, but I was really focused on the projectiles here where it spits out this ink. Obviously, these are just a placeholder sphere, but the idea being if the player walks into them, it then damages the player. and they fade over time a random amount. So I thought that was kind of cool because it'll add in an element of the player has to avoid them while they're running around. Next up, we have the launcher. I made this placeholder target. Not really in love with it, but it's better than just using the Space Fox. You can see it kind of moves out. You can control it around. I need to do some more work on the arc. It works well if it's far away, but as it gets closer, they get a little crazy. And then as you see, trying to kill a demon with it, it becomes pretty unwieldy to aim. So I'm gonna have to do some tuning around this to make it a little better, but I was happy I was able to get this working. Then we have the oil slick weapon. So the idea here is the backpack will be firing, it's supposed to be a fluid. Right now, technically I'm firing projectiles, but it'll emit from the bottom of the backpack, touch the ground, and much like the ink the bat leaves, it'll add this kind of oil slick to the ground, and if enemies run into it, it'll cause them to do damage. This one I have disappearing a uniform amount. Once again, this is going to be a bit of a tricky one to tune because I want to make it so enemies aren't just immediately killed by it, but also you're able to kind of thin out enemies using it. And the final weapon here, the drone weapon. This one still needs a lot of tuning when it comes to the drone behavior. The idea here is the drone will go to you, pick up an item, then chase after an enemy. As you'll see with the enemies, the drone just doesn't move fast enough, but as it is, when it hovers above an enemy, if you pull the right trigger, it'll drop a projectile, which when it hits the ground will do an AoE effect, much like the launcher. Taking a look at the Trello board at the end of the week, you can see I've cleared out this week. A little of this is by moving stuff, but gone through that. I still have now added polishing the bat, the drone, and the oil slick weapon. Those have been added, but you can see I've completed doing the 3E, our launcher, the bat, the oil, and the drone. And then in the to-do for the engine, I've added in the rotations on the particles, colliding with shelves, and I also have a bug in there that I need to fix. The plan moving forward is still going to be brick gameplay next week, then trailer following, but chipping away at this bit by bit. What a week that was. Gotta admit, I was stressing a little bit halfway through the video. That collision detection took a lot more time than I thought it would. I had to pull a bit of an audible, but hopefully it made for a bit of fun following Speedy John typing away. Next week, we're going to be doing that brick gameplay, very mysterious. I've never actually shown that publicly, so you'll want to check that out. And then hopefully, the week afterwards, I'll have a trailer to show with all you. So until then, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.